I like to quote Leonard Cohen, "There is a crack in everything." He says, there is a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in. Something that I have no trouble reminding myself of because I am driven. There is a crack in everything is the way to make a cautious personality go completely apeshit. There is a crack in everything. Cautious personalities idealize idealization. This is the perfect plan is planning to plan the perfect plan. That's the perfect plan. And the driven are exactly the opposite. The instantiation, the realization, the ideal is the real. What is to be idealized is the real. What is to be wished for and anticipated is the finished, is the completed, is the done. And yet we recognize in the world of real things that everything of reality is in some way imperfect, and everything that we can imagine as being perfect is inherently unreal. The driven and the cautious drive the human race. Don't stint either, and don't try to get along without them. But the cautious without the driven are so enamored of the ideal that they cannot tolerate the real. In the long run, the real is fundamentally crazy making. The chaos of the real is what they call it. The splendor of the real. Chaos or splendor, I mean, I talk about the human race facing the dump, and I'm facing the opposite direction, looking at the park that was built on top of the old landfill, if you insist. But arguably, we're all facing the same direction, and what you see is all the decay, and what I see is all the growth. What you see is all the waste and ruin, and what I see is all the leverage, the fruition, the resurrection of error in newer and better truths. Newer and better truths, not perfect truths. Not all the way finished, guaranteed, perfect, done, settled, scienced perfection. I don't believe in any of those things. There is a crack in everything. But better, just better. The title of today's homily is Empathy for What Comes Next, Fabulizing Three Futures. This is a very elaborate title for me. I like to make things long and mystifying, thus to increase my vast audience from 3 dozen to 4 dozen. But if we recognize that there is a crack in everything and that's how the light gets in, there is a crack in everything and that's how the future gets in. The crack in the sidewalk is where the little sapling takes root. I see this happen all the time. Opportunistic palm seeds, finding a place to grow, finding a little crack in the sidewalk to sink some roots down, and eventually that tree will excavate that sidewalk, dig it out and replace it, completely supplant it. There's a crack in everything, and that's how the future gets in. But we noted last week that the center cannot hold. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. So taking account that there's a crack in the center too, because there's a crack in everything, what is it that's going to replace the center now, what we think of as being the center of stability now? What is it that's going to replace it? And how soon will that happen? I have no idea. I think in terms of a 500-year timeline. I don't really look for big changes in human circumstances to take less than 500 years. I'm convinced that the internet will change that. And I'm loving the idea of an internet that could change the whole world in 500 days, but I've noted that that hasn't happened yet. But 5 years, 50 years? 50 years is pretty fast for human beings to make a big change. We've gotten better and better at changing quickly over the centuries, but we've also gotten exceptionally good at changing not at all for centuries at a time. But something that can't go on forever won't. We know that we are pursuing economic, regulatory, political policies that in the long run necessarily lead to crippling financial collapse, economic collapse, global economic collapse. We've seen it happen before. We know what leads up to it. We know that we're pursuing exactly the same policies that led up to it the last time. There's absolutely no reason to believe that anything will be different this time, except possibly the timeline. And this is all, again, as a result of efficiencies that are made possible by the internet. I don't know how long we can sustain the chicanery that you can juggle 6 eggs and claim that you're actually juggling 18. And as long as they're all airborne and moving pretty quickly, maybe nobody can get a good valid count and see how big your lie is. As soon as you pick those eggs out of the air and set them down on the table, it's pretty easy to see that you're 12 short. And the whole world is a dozen eggs short. And has been for quite a while. And will be 13 eggs short tomorrow and 15 eggs short the day after that. What can't go on forever won't. So what pops up to replace what's here? I can offer 3 ideas on this subject, 3 potential futures, and this is long-term stuff. I'm not talking about anything that's going to happen tomorrow, and anything that happens tomorrow may put the lie to what I'm saying today, and if that's so, dang. My predictions are worth everything you've paid for them. But it's worth thinking about in order to know what you should do. This is empathy for what comes next, and empathy is all about deciding what you should do next. This is discussed in 9 Empathies, which you should read. It had another 5-star review this week. My books are not widely read, but they are thoughtfully read, and the people who read them offer thoughtful, intelligent, high-ranking reviews. So you should read 9 Empathies, but empathy is about deciding what you're going to do next. Everything that we speak of when we speak of empathy, we're always trying to put it into terms of compassion or charity or things like that, but these are all secondary consequences. It's all still a matter of deciding what you're going to do next. And it is worthwhile for you to have an empathy for the future of your life outside your home, because things will change. It can't go on forever, won't. The center cannot hold. There is a crack in everything, and things will change. So these are my 3 prognostications. The first and most likely, in my opinion, the thing that is most likely to happen is a continuing tyranny of the cautious. We live in a cautious tyranny now. Marxism as such is a cautious tyranny. That's what Marxism is a cautious counter-revolution against driven social management. The world of the 17th, 18th, most of the 19th century was driven by drivens, and that's what made this incredible wealth possible, this unbelievable doubling and redoubling and redoubling and redoubling of human population, the incredible extended lifespans, the slashing of infant mortality rates, the incredible temporary surge, alas, in literacy rates, that When I was growing up, when I was a kid, when I was in school, starting school in 1965 or whenever it was, every adult in my experience, every adult that I knew could read, could write, could do math, at least through geometry, most of them through calculus. Most of them could play a musical instrument by sight reading. Many of them had a second language. These are ordinary working class people. They worked in factories. But this was the quality of the education that they had, you know, finishing school somewhere between 1925 and 1955 or so, 1960. These people were amazingly well educated. The people, the adults who were around me when I was a child were amazingly well educated, and educated in a way that people living now cannot wrap their minds around. You should go and find the elderly wherever you are. Find cogent elderly people and talk to them and find out how much they know that you don't know. But Marxism was a tyranny of the cautious imposed to take control of civil society, take control away from the driven sociables who had been managing things fairly well, often to their own advantage, but not too rapaciously, and managing things in large measure in a way that made everyone's lives better and made billions of lives possible. There are 7 billion people walking the earth today, and they are overwhelmingly the benefactors of maybe 700 individual people, maybe just 70, maybe even just 7. That if you take the key contributions of human beings at important moments in history, the contributions that led us to a place where some dumbass like me can write the cheap guitar and maunder on incessantly every Sunday, that made this unbelievable amount of wealth possible. It may have been, 7 people or 70 people. It may have been just a few people, and the rest of us are reclining on the shoulders of these giants. But Marxist tyrannies must collapse. Marxist tyranny is all about theft. It's all about organizing societies around theft in order to create bigger and bigger and bigger street gangs, so that the street gang will support you. And you need to use political force, actual coercion, actual compulsion to get people to go along with your perfectly planned paradise. But it seems most plausible to me that what we have to look forward to is more of the tyranny of the cautious. This week we saw a conversation of sorts about political correctness. The whole conversation was relating to the politics of political correctness, which is erroneous in my opinion. The purpose of political correctness is correctness. The purpose of political correctness is cautious tyranny. It is an aggressive display. It is not an affectionate display. It is an aggressive display that the initial overture to conversation, the introduction to the conversation, consists of a complaint and a challenge and ultimately an accusation. It is the political is the personal is the political. This is about taking anything that you happen to say and by means of an ad hominem fallacy, immediately turning it into a personal attack. That's all it is. And the answer to all of political correctness, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, the answer to all of political correctness is simply butthurt is not contagious. Dang, you're offended. How sad for you. I hope it doesn't take you weeks and weeks to recover, but meanwhile, I'm delighted that butthurt is not contagious. I'm in love with me, and I feel fine. That is the solution to it, and that until the people having this debate come to that conclusion, they're spinning their wheels. The other side will continue to win because they're not naming the elephant in the room. And then the elephant in the room is dominance. The purpose of political correctness, the purpose of every aggressive display is dominance. When a person approaches you with an aggressive display, their intention is to enslave you, not necessarily with shackles and chains, but to rob you of your right, your belief in your right to act independently in your own behalf, and to induce you to act in the way that that other person wants you to act instead, either in that instant moment or forever after. I mean, the ultimate purpose of political correctness is to get you to shut the fuck up, to get you to shut up, to get you to fear to say anything at all for fear of being attacked again, facing that same kind of personal attack, maybe more abusive, maybe more public, maybe viral and nationwide. Maybe it destroys your reputation forever, and so you just shut the fuck up, and that is the purpose. It has nothing to do with politics. The politics is just show, just so much waxed fruit set out on the table to make you think that there's going to be a banquet. There is no banquet. This is a show trial. That's all it is. And the purpose of a show trial is not even to punish you. It's to silence everyone else. Everyone else is aware of that show trial and aware that they don't want it to be them sitting in the seat of the guest of honor of the show trial. And so they shut the fuck up. That's the purpose. Every mature social democracy, that's what we call Marxist states on the slow path to death camps. Marxism always ends in death camps. It just takes a while to get there. Because the driven are so driven, that's why the driven won't stop being driven. This is the argument in Atlas Shrugged. For the driven to stop being driven. It's the only way to stop a cautious tyranny is for the driven to stop being driven. Ultimately, they do stop. They do. The sound of Atlas Shrugging, what is the sound of Atlas Shrugging? You want fries with that? These are driven children who should be doing something vitally important with their lives, something really productive with their lives, and instead, if they're lucky, they get to ask, do you want fries with that? At the other end, you have, extremely talented, well-educated people who stop working or who simply work their investments and don't produce wealth. This is the sound of Atlas Shrugging. Atlas Shrugged, the novel, takes 13 years to take place in the way that the book is written, but it's extremely accelerated. It takes 130 years, if you're lucky, maybe less, not much more than that. But eventually, you end up in Starnesville. Marxism can only end in Starnesville because Marxism destroys invested capital. It takes invested capital, turns it into one meal, turns that one meal into one bowel movement, and then that money is flushed away forever. This is the actual net effect of Marxism, is to take invested capital and to turn it into bowel movements. And there is no future beyond a bowel movement. There's a crack in everything, but there's a limit to how much human manure we need to fertilize these new crops. Marxism must result in universal starvation and ultimately death camps because theft doesn't produce wealth. And theft as policy makes wealth production impossible. You've made wealth production impossible, you've made starvation ubiquitous. This is the long-run future of cautious tyranny. We'll get to it in the second future, alas. What we can expect in the meantime is for our own so-called social democracy to mature into a sort of a stasis where we have two parties, the incandescent party versus the cautious party. You'll note that there really is no room for the driven in a mixed economy, and sociability goes out the window when the cautious take control. Incandescent tyranny is just a cautious tyranny in the making, and so one or the other, you get the happy days are here again party that promises you everything at somebody else's expense, and you get the sniggling goo-goo party who promises to give you all the free benefits, but even cheaper than the other guys. It's all just cautious tyranny in the end. There is no way to endorse these Marxist premises without achieving the Marxist objectives. That's just faster or slower, with a ignorant smile on your face or with a thoroughly justified scowl. It really doesn't matter because you're going to hell in a handcart either way. A solution to this, and I hate to offer solutions, and I'm so glad at this point that there are only 4 dozen people who will see this at the most, is a center party, frankly. I've been expecting this for a little while, to see the more conservative Democrats and the more liberal Republicans chop out the middle and become the center that will not hold for a while. Take the identity politics wings of both parties, the feminists, the Marxists, the LGBTQ, blah, 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 those people, and also the Christian conservatives, single issue conservatives, pro-life, gun nut conservatives, identity politics in general, call that the left. Principled proprietarian, libertarian politics, call that the right. These are all just fringe parties now. You've got, at a minimum, you've got 3 parties, 1 big one and 2 small ones, and maybe you've got 1 big one and a half a dozen small ones, or maybe even more. But the idea of the United States being a center-right country is kind of false. The United States is a Rotarian socialist country. The real political power in this country resides with people who live in big houses on big lots and work in businesses that are substantially protected by Rotarian socialist legislation. We live in a crony capitalist country, and if all of the crony capitalists in the center decided to gang up on the identity politics of the left, the principle politics of the right, if they decided to gang up on those fringe movements, they could take over the country for the Goo-Goos for maybe for 50 years, for quite a while, because as stupidly as we manage our political economy in the United States, we're still not as stupid as we might be, and it is plausibly possible to manage this dairy better. That's what the Laffer curve is all about. That's what Reaganomics was all about, was taking the United States economy as a whole and treating it like a giant dairy and figuring out which sort of management policy results in better milk production. And every taxpayer was a milk cow to Reaganomics. Every taxpayer is an animal of prey in one way or another to taxing authorities. So I'm not just criticizing Reagan, I'm criticizing everybody who argues for any sort of a tax. But the Laffer curve is all about how to manage the dairy better so that the cows produce more milk. That's what it's about. And it is possible for a center party to do that kind of cautious management. This is the kind of management that the cautious are good at, grinding management. They're not good at growth, but they're good at grinding. And it is plausible that a center party could manage the welfare state of the United States, the welfare states of Western Europe, Canada, Japan, etc., Australia. The welfare states of the West, broadly defined, might be better managed by a center party. But even so, the center cannot hold. There is a crack in everything. This will be replaced. And so what in due course will replace it, the most likely scenario, alas, would be an authoritarian collapse, a collapse of government as we know it, and little douches and fiefdoms rising up to replace it. And I have no idea how that would work out, and I don't want to characterize it in any kind of detailed way because these sorts of predictions are useless. The problem is that to the extent that the idea of government has any sort of legitimacy, it has legitimacy with Marxists and with, I don't know what you'd call them. It's kind of sort of neo-papists, authoritarians in general, whatever flavor of their authoritarianism takes. If we distinguish them from Marxists, which in many cases it is possible to distinguish them from Marxists, they are nevertheless advocates of coercion, of compulsion, of rigid order enforced by force of arms. This is not a direction to be idealized. This is not a direction to prefer. The past is prologue. This is what actually happens when overextended theft-based governments collapse. This is what has actually happened in the past. And so it is easy to argue that something very like this will happen when the cautious tyranny collapses. It will be incandescents and drivens, I guess, rising up to repudiate and discredit the cautious argument without really repudiating anything that makes tyranny tyranny. They will repudiate the cautiousness and cling to the tyranny, just as political correctness has nothing to do with politics and everything to do with correctness. And I would hope that if something like this happens, I would hope that it would be short-lived. And there are reasons to think that it would, that when a man claims that he is justified in taking up arms, then you can make an argument of justice with him. And even if he really is a thug. If he's willing to talk about justice, you can undermine him anyway. This is exactly how the West became the West. This is how the West remains the West. Is reasonable, well-defended men taking on tyrants and convincing them of their own evil. That the real victories for liberty throughout human history came about not because of warriors fighting for liberty. Very important. I don't want to take anything away from them, particularly from Leonidas. We owe everything we have to Leonidas. We should have a holiday for him. But the real victories for liberty come about by individual men recognizing their own errors, their own evil, and resolving to do better, or their children recognizing the evil that their parents had committed and forswearing that evil in their own lives. We are moral because of our moral philosophy. And we are so moral because our moral philosophy has been so good so far. So I believe that if something like this does happen, it might be very, very short in duration and very easy to reabsorb into something that is more just and less coercive. And as weak as we might be in education right now, nevertheless, there are a great number of very deeply educated people out there, and there is a great resiliency of spirit in people, especially young people. Young people are hard to push around. I like people who are hard to push around. People who are hard to push around are potentially future libertarians. The other thing that gives me hope in this scenario is the existence of the internet itself. I talked earlier about the internet making it possible for changes to happen much more quickly, for people to learn newer and better ideas in a few years or in one generation instead of 500 years. And the existence of the internet, and depending on how much of it survives a collapse, will be there to help people relearn the ideas that they never really mastered in the first place. Learn why human liberty is inescapable, because human sovereignty is a matter of ontological fact. There is no alternative to human sovereignty. I am solely controlled from the inside out. There's nothing you can do to control my purposive behavior from the outside. Absolutely nothing. And because of that, I am necessarily free of you. And because I am necessarily free of you, you are necessarily free of me. We are each of us free of all the others. And to respond in any other way is irrational. This is something that we will have to discover. Ideally, we discover it before all of civilization collapses, but if not, we'll have to discover it afterward, and one may hope the internet will be there to help us learn what we should have and could have learned already. There's a third future I can imagine in here, and that is the one we're talking about, a libertarian epiphany. To speak of an epiphany in more than one mind is an error. Epiphanies only happen. All consciousness is local. Epiphanies only happen within an individual mind. But given the viral nature of the internet, given the scalability of the arguments, given the vast number of serious, dedicated, committed libertarians there are out there, given the excellent object lessons, cautionary tales being taught to us by Barack Obama in the ongoing collapse of America's cautious tyranny, given all of these things around us right now, there's certainly plenty for libertarians to talk about with their friends and neighbors. And the friends and neighbors are aware of what's going on all over the place, and plausibly are more receptive to your arguments than they ever have been before. This could be the libertarian moment. I don't know if it is or isn't. I hope it is. I believe in the rapidity of change, and change that can happen rapidly because of the scalability of the internet. This would be a wonderful time to have a demonstration of that. But there is a crack in everything. The center cannot hold. But that crack in everything is how the future gets in. And and the future will get in. It will. No matter how much you might want things to stay the same, you might want them to be the way they were in the past. You might want them to be some specific and detailed way in the immediate future. And you might win the lottery. But the future will happen. It will come. It will belong to the people who are having children now, because the only people who will be around will be the children of the children of the children of the people who are having children now. The future will belong to them, and it will belong to their great-great-great-grandparents in consequence, and to no one else. But as long as you understand that things can get better, that you can get better from the inside out, that your life can get better in consequence of your efforts, that your family life can get better as a result of your affectionate displays and the affectionate responses you get in consequence. Your extended family, your life with your friends, your job, everything in your life can get better. This is true for everyone else. And you can share this message of hope in the future with them. And then you can own a piece of the future whether you have any children or not. A year ago today, would have been later today, so about 4 hours from now, I performed the wedding of Anthony Johnson and Marilee Ellis Johnson. Wonderful experience for me. Wonderful experience for me. And the whole weekend was wonderful for us. It was a great weekend for our marriage. They put us up in the Renaissance Hotel on Paradise. No smoking, no gambling. My ideal of a perfect Las Vegas hotel. If I want a casino, I can go to a casino. But when I want to get away from the casino, no smoking, no gambling. Perfect. But we had a wonderful time. It was a very loving and sexy weekend for us. And obviously it was a very big deal for me, and therefore it was a very big deal for Kathleen. I was doing something really important and something that is really right in my wheelhouse, what it is that I should be doing with my time, what it is that I'm doing with my time here every Sunday, and what I should be doing with my time. This is the way that my philosophy will be spread, is one marriage, one family at a time, one little set of rugrats, soon to become more rugrats, soon to become more rugrats, unless I will take over the world. Not me personally, just my ideas, and that's all I care about. It's not a cult of personality. I don't care about my own stake in this game at all, but I do care about the ideas. I do care about human sovereignty, about the self, about the expression of the self, about living your life from the inside out, about doing better in every way that you can, in every value that you uphold within your life, and having the future that you want, regardless of what's going on outside your home. Having as much of you as you can, of as much as you want, of all of the things that you want in your life. How do you go about getting it? From the inside out. You're a hoplite, man or woman, you're a hoplite, and it's your job to make your own life. It's your job to make of it what you want. But that was a great experience for me at making manifest the kind of world that I believe in. That when I link this movie, I will link to the address that I gave at the wedding. And I wish now I had done it extempore. I did it from a script because I wanted to say exact and perfect things, and I wanted to say them exact and perfectly. It's okay. But I wish I'd done it extempore like this, because I like this style of speaking better. And I feel in the large I communicate better. But in any case, it was a wonderful weekend for us. I'm hoping that it turns out to be a wonderful marriage for Anthony and Marilee. He's in a state of butthurt with me, and usually that's fatal. Usually it's forever. I can't do anything about it. I didn't do anything wrong, and therefore there's nothing I can do to fix it. It's Anthony broke our relationship. It's his job to fix it. And other than impeding access to work that I made for his benefit which I think is churlish and small, I don't really have any complaint. I feel sorry for him because I married him, and for him to ditch me less than a year later makes, I don't know, might make his anniversary harder to celebrate. I hope not. I hope that's not the case. But in any case, his anniversary is very much a celebration for me. Anthony and Marilee's anniversary, we celebrated it all weekend. By that name, celebrating their anniversary, not ours. We celebrate ours, but we celebrate theirs. We were involved. We were parties to it. We helped to make that home. And it matters. It matters to us. It matters to our marriage. And it makes our marriage so much stronger. I'm delighted by it. I'm really delighted by it. I love those kind of things anyway. I love the momentous events in life because these are the ones you keep. These are the ones you keep by choice. There are other events that turn out to be momentous and that you end up keeping whether you'd rather not have any memory of them at all. They come back anyway, but the ones that I love are the ones that I keep by choice. And this is huge deal in my life, and huge deal in Kathleen's life, and a huge deal in our marriage. And it will be forever. I think that's very cool. I think that's very cool. But happy anniversary to Anthony and Marilee. Many, many more. 100 more anyway. We'll try to do that many also. My name is Greg Swann. This is the Church of Splendor. I'm so glad you could join me today. Someday soon we may talk about what might be the contents of a libertarian epiphany, how we might expect to see something like that play out. I'm eager for any happy road signs that you happen to see. So if you want to tell me about them, I love that idea. But in the meantime, thanks for joining me this week. I will see you next week. Bye-bye now.